Picture this for a second. The world as you know it is completely gone. You're completely alone, surrounded by the deafening silence of a ruined world, locked inside a tiny claustrophobic room that you've basically turned into a makeshift fortress. You spent countless days, maybe months, maybe even years, doing absolutely everything in your power just to stay alive, waiting for some kind of rescue that, let's be honest, you aren't even sure is coming. This is the intensely gripping, suspenseful premise of the short film Last Man. So, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to unpack the incredible psychological layers of this apocalyptic scenario. We're diving deep into what it actually means to survive, the crushing weight of total isolation, and a truly mind-bending philosophical twist about the nature of purpose itself. Let's get into it.
So, we drop right into the action with a moment of absolute heart-stopping terror. Our protagonist realizes his ultimate sanctuary has been breached. Up until now, he's been perfectly isolated, just listening to a little music box play the Itsy Bitsy Spider, totally sealed off from whatever horrors are out there. And then, the music stops. He turns around and utters this line, "Oh my God." The door was open. You can just feel the immediate suspense, right? His absolute isolation has just been completely shattered. After all this time assuming he was the literal last man on Earth, someone or something has just walked right into his meticulously secured safe space.
All right, Section 1, the apocalyptic survivor, clinging to the familiar.
Let's look at his specific survival tactics. He didn't run off into the woods or build some high-tech underground bunker. Instead, he just boarded himself up inside his old workplace. He survived on canned foods he remembered from a Boy Scout bottle drive that happened right before everything started going. And how exactly did he pass the time in this endless, mind-numbing isolation? Solitaire, learning new languages that he had literally no one to speak to with, just sitting and thinking. He relied on these incredibly mundane, structured tasks just to keep his mind occupied. It's actually a fascinating look at how we desperately try to maintain some sense of normalcy and control when the entire world outside is completely collapsed.
But, all that time spent just thinking led him to a pretty dark place. He explains his core psychological state to the intruder with this deeply profound realization. He says, "Life scares me. All I know is that death scares me more." He even calls it a shitty predicament. And man, this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate human paradox. He's totally paralyzed. He is terrified of living a completely lonely, isolated existence in this boarded-up room, but his absolute dread of the finality of death is literally the only thing keeping him going. He's trapped in a mental purgatory, surviving just for the sake of surviving, purely out of fear.
Moving on to Section 2, the unexpected visitor, a spark of hope.
So our protagonist, totally reeling from the shock of seeing another person, naturally asks the visitor how they managed to survive the apocalypse. And the visitor's response is incredibly cryptic. They just state, "I still had some things to do." Notice the strange, almost mechanical phrasing there? I mean, a normal survivor might say, "Oh, I got lucky," or "I hid," or "I fought my way out." But this visitor simply frames their survival as having an unfinished checklist. It's a super eerie response, and it subtly lays the groundwork for the massive twist that's about to hit us.
But the thing is, our protagonist completely misses that eerie undertone. Instead, he just grabs onto the visitor's words like a lifeline. He projects his own desperate need for purpose right onto this silent intruder. He leaps to the conclusion that if this person survived because they had things to do, well then maybe that's why he survived too. You can really feel this sudden burst of manic hope from him. He starts exclaiming that it must be their destiny. They're supposed to go out there, find others, start over, and rebuild humanity. After years of terrifying, lonely survival, his brain just instantly constructs this grand, heroic narrative to give all of his suffering some sort of meaning.
Which brings us to Section 3, the ultimate twist, the end of the line. The visitor suddenly cuts right through the man's manic rambling with a devastating truth. No, you're the last one. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. In a single breath, that whole grand delusion of rebuilding society is just wiped away. Humanity is entirely gone. This is absolutely not a rescue mission. The visitor isn't some fellow survivor looking for friends to repopulate the Earth with. No, the visitor is here because they have a job to finish.
So, there is a massive gap here. On one side, we have the man's delusion, the belief that he found a fellow survivor, a partner to rebuild society with, and ultimate proof that his long, painful survival was destined for a greater purpose. But on the other side, we have the stark, grim reality. There is no society left to rebuild. The visitor is actually death, or at least some entity functioning as the Grim Reaper, who has finally come to finish the job because the man's survival is a complete anomaly. It was supposed to be quick, the entity says, and yet, here you are.
Section 4. A shared existential crisis, two sides of the same coin.
Now this is where the story elevates from a simple thriller into something truly profound. The entity makes a shocking confession. It tells the man, "My entire existence I've done one job, one purpose for existing, one meaning. I never thought I'd be here, I never thought I'd get to this point, but now it's all going to be over." Just think about the weight of that for a second. Death itself is facing an existential crisis. If its literally only purpose is to end life, well, what happens when there is no life left to end? Successfully finishing this final job means the entity will lose its entire reason to exist.
Look at the perfect parallel between our two characters here. The man's current goal is to survive at all costs, but his core fear is dying before he ever finds a meaning to his life. On the flip side, the entity's current goal is to finish this final job, but its core fear is losing all purpose once humanity is entirely gone. They're beautifully mirrored. Both of them are standing at the absolute end of the world, staring directly into the void, and they are completely terrified of what comes next when their driving purpose is taken away.
And the crazy thing is, the entity recognizes this shared dread. It brilliantly throws the man's own words right back at him. Remember what the man said earlier about his own mental state? Well, now the entity says it. Afraid of living and afraid of dying, huh? Yeah, that is a shitty predicament. By repeating that exact phrase, the entity is cementing their shared tragedy. The entity is afraid of living in a universe with absolutely no purpose, but dying, or completing its final task, is just as terrifying. They are trapped in the exact same paradox.
And that leads us to our final section, the final predicament, a desperate bargain.
Realizing that the entity doesn't actually want its purpose to end, the man attempts his wildly improvised, super desperate negotiation. He proposes a twisted game of cat and mouse. Step 1, you just let me go. Step 2, I run away and find somewhere new. Step 3, you chase me forever. It is such a desperate pitch to artificially extend both of their existences. Think about it. If the man keeps running, he gets to stay alive. If the entity keeps chasing him, the entity gets to keep its purpose. The man is basically saying, hey, we can save each other from the void. We can create our own endless meaning right here, right now.
But the entity cannot accept the bargain. It doesn't work like that, it says. It's not up to me. The rules of the universe just cannot be bent, not even for death itself. And so we're left with this raw, tragic vulnerability. Stripped of all his grand illusions of rebuilding society, stripped of his clever negotiations, the man is reduced to his most basic, terrified self. He just begs, please don't do this. I don't want to die. Not yet. It is a heartbreaking final plea for just a little more time, right before the abrupt, inevitable end. I want to walk you through exactly how that ending plays out orally, because the sound design here really tells the final story. Moment 0. The man screams. 1 second later, there's this sudden, visceral slicing noise, followed by a heavy thud. It's over. But then, 3 seconds later, something incredibly haunting happens. That little music box chimes in again, playing Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Finally, over 10 seconds, the music just slowly fades away into absolute nothingness. Think about the lyrics to that childish nursery rhyme for a second. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. It ironically underscores the inescapable, cyclical nature of life and death, fading out as the very last human consciousness is extinguished from the earth. Which brings us to the end of our explainer, and to a question I really want to leave you with. This whole story pushes us to examine the very core of our own motivations. The man survived on sheer fear. The entity existed purely to perform a single function. So I ask you, if your only purpose is running from the inevitable, are you truly living at all? Or are you, kind of like our protagonist before the door opened, just boarding yourself up in the dark, waiting for an end you can't control? It's a profound, lingering thought to carry with you today. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this fascinating story. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.